Aye.
Any opposed, please
Aye.
say nay. All right, so our agenda is adopted. Next up, we've got approval of the minutes. Again, that was included as a link in the email that Nathan sent out a couple days back. Everyone should have them. Are there any changes that folks would like to make to the minutes from the last meeting? If not, then entertain a motion to approve.
I did want to jump in really quick, Denver. Quick update. The minutes are all recorded, so they're pretty hard to get them wrong. But then we did want to update the next meeting to include today's date, with the exception we did have it listed as January, but we wanted to do this update before the January meeting because we had so many new members and wanted to help set up January well. So that would be my only change, is to move the next meeting date to December 8th instead of January 13th.
Okay, thank you, Bradley, for that clarification. Is there someone that would like to make that amendment to the minutes?
This is Pam. I'll make the amendment.
Pam, I should have been more specific. Is there a member of the committee that would like to make a motion to change the?
I'm the alternate for Todd.
Oh, thank you, Pam. I appreciate that clarification. Great. So it's been moved by Pam. Is there a second?
Second, Kathy Nygaard, also an alternate.
Also an alternate for the Democratic or the Republican group?
At large.
At large. Thank you. Wonderful. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. All right, and so that amendment passes, and we have our minutes adopted. So next up, before we get into comment, actually, I'm sorry, one second. I just closed out my agenda. All right, sorry about that, folks. So let's go ahead and have any members of the public that are not on the committee would like to offer comment. Now is the time to do so. Is there anyone who would like to comment on something that is not on the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Just want to say a few words before we get into our report from Bradley on the election minister update. So first of all, welcome back, everyone. I know it's been a while since we've had a group meeting, but I always just want to acknowledge and appreciate people taking time out of their day to serve our community in this way. We also have two new members of our committee, and really excited to hear from them and to get to work with them. Bradley is going to provide a space for intros in his report. So we'll hold off on that. Because we do have some new members, I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of revisit the purpose of the EAC and talk about what our committee is and what we hope to do. So if you take a look at the bylaws, our role is basically to advise the county commission on ways to improve elections. And it goes a little bit more in depth into that, specifies that our advisory should be on planning, budgeting, and promotion. And beyond that, it's fairly open-ended. Ways to improve elections, in my mind, means increasing the number of people served and improving customer service. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot of clear direction and guidelines and boundaries about what our committee should do or should be. And so the focus has looked different over times. Some of the things that the EAC has done has been really effective in creating a public opinion survey that reached out in a scientific way and sampled and identified community needs. At other times, members of this committee have worked to expand the number of members and voices involved in that committee in hopes of connecting with other parts of the community that are underserved or not typically part of these conversations. We have also worked in previous years to actively recruit election judges, and we've done a fantastic job with that. Earlier this year, we also worked with county commissioners to push forward a resolution to provide prepaid postage on absentee ballots. And I was really proud that our county looked and acted before the state did when it came to making those changes and providing payment for absentee ballot return. That was something that was unique to our community in some ways, and proud of the leadership that our committee and our county commissioners showed. And in many other ways, we actively and directly volunteer either as election judges or in some other ways with the election. There's a lot that our committee has done and a lot more that we can do. And I'm really excited personally with the new additions to our committee and new people coming on. I think we've got a lot of really great minds and people who earnestly want to see Missoula have the best elections possible. But I think in order to meet that goal, we also need to have a general plan for what it is that we are going to do and the specific ways that we want to interact with the elections office and to work with them. So in order to create that goal, there's a couple different ways that we hope to do that. One is to identify areas of specialization or expertise that people have when it comes to the elections office. There's a lot of different things that election staff do, and finding ways to, as individuals, become more knowledgeable about their work and the challenges that they face to be able to have a more educated understanding of the issues that they take on and ways that we can advise. That's probably one of the most important things that we can do. Beyond that, we also want to hear from folks about what they want to accomplish in the time that they're serving on this committee. So we're not going to do that right now, but what we will be doing, Bradley and I, later this week, will be sending out an email to everyone asking about what areas of specialization they would like to really focus on and what their overall goal might be. You may not have a clear answer to what that is right now, as far as an overall goal. But we want to think outside the box, and we want people to really bring their ideas and their passions forward. So you can look for that. And the goal is in January, when we come back together, to have an outline of a plan that we can all work toward. And we'd like input and buy-in from committee members. And then, of course, also we want to have a plan that the county commission feels good about as well. So with that said, I'm going to step back and turn it over to Bradley for a report on our elections.
You bet. Thanks, Denver. I really appreciate it. And so really quickly, what I'd like to do is just take a second and bear with me as I'm catching everybody here. But I wanted to do a quick round of introductions. For those of you, I'm almost certain that we've all met, both through interviews and work with the elections. But I'm Bradley Seaman. I'm the elections administrator. I'm really excited to be working with this really robust committee. This is the first time since the beginning of the year that we have had a fully staffed advisory committee. So I'm really excited that we filled in all of the different positions, and now we're working towards setting up that overarching goal. Then next, I'll kind of read off people to do an introduction, which will help us flow through. If I could have Nathan jump in next.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nathan Coyan. I'm the Deputy Elections Administrator. I just wanted to also just double check and make sure that Todd Mowbray was able to get on here and join us as well. Todd, is that you on there?
Yes, it is. I did.
Excellent. Excellent. Sorry, that was, yeah.
No, that's perfect. Todd, would you mind doing a quick introduction?
Sure. I'm the Todd Mowbray, the representative from the Missoula County Democrat Central Committee. And I think I've been on the committee 3 years, something like that, 4.
Great, thanks, Tom. And then Pam, I've got you next on my screen. Could you jump in? This is a great area to catch you.
Hi, I'm Todd's alternate with the Missoula County Democrats, and I actually was on the original Elections Advisory Committee before it became really formal, back when we were transitioning from an elected administrator to an appointed one.
Back with Vicki.
Yeah, and Rebecca.
Great. Josh, I actually have you up next.
Bradley. So I'm Josh Slotnick. I'm one of the 3 county commissioners. And I'll be here in this meeting for a little while. I'm going to have to jump off, but I'm really excited to be here. And I'm just super, super proud of everything associated with elections and how it all went this year. And it's not just me, it's unanimous among the 3 of us, our board of county commissioners. We're just so proud of Bradley and Nathan and your team and EAC, everything, that it went as well as it did in a year where scrutiny was intense and all emotions were intense too. So really well done.
Thanks, Josh. Travis, I actually have you up next.
My apologies. I had a phone call. What are we doing?
Just a quick introduction.
Oh, okay. So Travis Hoffman. I am the advocacy coordinator at Summit Independent Living here in Missoula. And I am the ADA person on the advisory committee. I think I've been on the committee for 2 or 3 years now. I can't remember when I first came on. And I serve as vice chair currently.
Thanks, Travis. And then I think next, 1775 is Mike, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is.
Great.
My name is Mike Hoffman, here for the Missoula Republican Party. I'm a local legislator here in Missoula representing House District 92.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Next up, I've got Susan. Susan, could you give a quick introduction?
I am a newbie. So I moved here from Alaska back in 2000, have worked at elections since about 2008, I guess. I like the culture that the elections department has. It's just really a can-do attitude, and I want to be part of that.
Thank you. Now, next I have 9664, and I'm not totally certain who that is. My apologies. With the
Might
phone
be
number.
me.
Yeah, it is you.
That's my phone, part of my phone number. This is Kathy Nygaard, and I'm also a newbie. Today is my first time with you all as the at-large alternate.
Thanks, Kathy. And then Denver, I've got you next. I know you did a quick interview, or a quick introduction when we got started, but please, again, I'd love it.
Sure. So, folks, my name is Denver Henderson. I'm the current chair of our committee. I've served on our committee for about 4 years now and have worked with 3 different election administrators. And in my normal day-to-day job, I work as an organizer with low-wage healthcare workers.
Okay. Thanks, Denver. And
thank you.
Next, I've got Christina.
Hey there. hopefully you can hear me. My internet's a little wacky. I'm Christina Barsky. I'm a full-time faculty member at the University of Montana in the Department of Public Administration and Policy, which is in the law school, so it's a little confusing. But my special area of research, what I study, is actually elections administration and administrators. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm a new member and to share the space with fellow election nerds.
Thanks, Christina. I'm excited. And I always get a little nervous around Christina, who did her doctoral on elections administration. And I think that that's a fantastic addition to the EAC sort of area where we can really have some great, robust conversations. Next, I have two people as guests. I know that one is Shibu. Shibu, could I have you do a quick introduction?
Yes. Hi, I'm Shibu Ahrens. I'm one of the commissioner-appointed members. And I've been on the EAC long enough, I believe, to be nearing the end of my term soon. And I am also an election nerd, and I'm really looking forward to Bradley's update on how the election played out in Missoula County. So nice to meet you all who I haven't met.
Thanks, Shibu. And last but not least, I have one more person, and forgive me if I haven't called on you yet. Could you please introduce yourself to the team?
So this is Rebecca Dawson, and I am Mike Hopkins' alternate. And this is my first year.
Thanks, Rebecca. It goes back to just guest, and I lose you really quickly. I really appreciate that. Thanks to everybody for the team, for joining the team. I'm so excited. We've got such a robust view of people. We've got some great minds, some great areas. And to just kind of dive into things, to be mindful of time, I did want to touch a little bit on what Shibu had mentioned, and we will have 2 terms expiring this next year. I'll be working closely with Sarah and the commission to advertise those terms, but both Shibu and Denver's terms will be expiring. So we'll want to work to see if you would be interested in serving again, and if not, we'll be working hard to advertise those positions. We did have 37 applicants for the last round, so there are a lot of interested people. However, I think it would be very helpful also to continue forward some of this institutional knowledge. A quick update for me as the election administrator, I filled this specific role in March of this year. I've been working with the elections office since 2016 in January. And I did a lot of work with the EAC before I was with the elections department, then served for a little bit well on staff, opened my seat up for another person, and then I did not participate much throughout 2018, but I'm excited to be back in and working hard in 2020, 2018, 2019, now working hard to help make sure that EAC can be as beneficial as possible. Also with that, in January, we will be having nominations for leadership positions, chair, vice chair, and you'll notice that I did add in here secretarial duties. I always think that it's great. Nathan and I have been taking charge, helping make sure that we're getting out agendas, doing minutes, some of these other areas, but it's a really great way to be engaged, not a huge lift. We want to just bring that up and discuss if there was an option for a secretarial position during the next meeting. I think that we've got a lot of info to cover, and before I get too far into here, I'll just go through a quick building update and then dive into some number breakdowns about the election, which seems to be really the big area here. With our building, we were able to pause the construction and utilize it in a very similar capacity to what we had for the primary election. Now, we've broken construction on this into multiple different phases. Phase 1 being the election center, what will be our late registration area. After the election, we cleared out of that right away, and they're undergoing the completion of phase 1. Hopefully, mid-January, that side of the building will have power, plumbing, light, heat, everything, and it'll be available for a training area and a utilization space for late registration, Office of Emergency Management, and many other steps. Today, we had a great meeting discussing the second phase, and in order to do the multi-step phase of this building, we'll have to wait till the next fiscal year to be able to fund the project fully. In the next phase, we're going to complete the south half of that building, which will become the area where we tabulate ballots. So it'll be our counting center in there. And then we'll also do the site work. Big areas of site work include the permanent addition of our sign, changing the entries and exits to add one off of Russell Street and off of Wyoming to improve the flow. And one thing that we did is, as we were looking at that final setup, we added a semi-permanent structure, a pad, where we can add a ballot drop-off hut, so that in the future we can have kind of a semi-permanent, more heated space with light and power availability for people working in there, and set it up in an area that'll flow with the updated parking lot. With the huge successes we had with drive-through ballot drop-off, we want to meet voters where they're at, encourage that sort of participation, and make it easy both on the voters and our staff. We had dedicated staff out there in degrees that below zero out collecting ballots. So trying to make this a little bit better set up, more lighting, more heat, a little bit more semi-permanent so we can move it out, move it back, but really build that into our future infrastructure. With that, we're also working on some grant proposals for ADA access to this building. That is technically in phase 3, which is not slated for the next fiscal year, but we're working hard to see where we can help improve this access ahead of time. And we're working closely with a couple of different county agencies. We'll be meeting over the next few weeks, and depending on the construction that takes place on the other building, we'd love to get a jump start on ADA improvements to our office. All of this is contingent on scheduling and financing. So just a quick broad update to you that yes, the election center side will be finished and completed later this January. Starting in July, we're going to be working hard on our site work as well as the south half of that building. And then the next step will be improvements to our office. But that's some of the changes that you can expect to see as we go through this process. Questions about that, as I've got a few different areas and I'm about to start off on our presentation.
I've got a question, Bradley.
Yeah.
Todd. I'll turn my video on if it comes on. Yeah. Where do you plan to store the machines then?
So in part of this, right now our storage of our equipment is located out at the fairgrounds in building 35.
Mm-hmm.
Part of this equipment upgrade is going to be in what's currently the loading dock. And we're building in secure storage with key card access. So that'll be an improvement to the security and the storage of our voting equipment. It'll be located on site. We're currently going through a records request and have to schedule access to the fairgrounds to pull records from our equipment. But we're working hard on getting that access, and that'll be part of that second phase, is the storage and construction of a secure access area for those 850s. Now for our polling place equipment, our express votes and our precinct level tabulators, that will remain out at the warehouse. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we get later in. We just have so much of it that there's not room to store that securely here at this site, but we will move our tabulators in there.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Any other questions, guys? Okay, without any further ado, I know you guys love a PowerPoint. I'm excited to bring this up for you. 1 second as it's pulling it up on the screen right now. Let me know when you can start to see that presentation. Can everybody view it?
Got it.
Great. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about some of our numbers. Let's talk about how this election went and just sort of the future. I always love to do a quick breakdown. After this election, with the amount of breakdown we had, we've got a really great broad overview for you. As Josh knows, we went through our canvas and we were able to present some of this to the Board of County Commissioners. In general, our voter turnout was just shy of 80%. We had 91,080 registered voters. And in the primary election, we had 84,600. So we had an increase of almost 6,000 registered voters between the primary and now. Now, we issued out 86,000 absentee ballots and accepted in 72,632. That's a ballot return rate of 90.84%. Now, I always like to cover these numbers because you'll notice that we have almost 12,000 more registered voters than ballots that were issued out, including our reissued ballots. So when I'm taking a look, I'm using my reissued ballots compared to the number of ballots not returned and accepted. I like to talk about voters who were given the opportunity to vote and voted, not our inactive voters who were not given the opportunity. So I have two numbers, a ballot return rate and a voter turnout. And there was a bit of confusion about this actually, because the Secretary of State was reporting out the absentee number and then on election day turned that number into registered voters. Well, there was no improprieties of this. It was just simply that the way they were reporting data had changed. But we had those 86,401 ballots that were issued, accepted in that 72,632. One of the other areas, we only had 4,785 ballots that were sent to voters that were not returned. For our rejected number, at the end of the election, we had 72 rejected. Now that's out of 86,000. And now those rejected ballots would have been rejected due to the signature not matching what's on file or not having a signature at all. We actually had 287 rejected ballots, but through the work of our dedicated staff, we were able to work with those voters and bring that number down to 72. And then in addition to this, we had done a lot of cleanup after the last election, and we were able to bring our undeliverable ballot number down to 2,348. Those are just fantastic numbers when it comes to our turnout. So we crunched some of our numbers as well. And the average age of a voter in this election was 49 years old. The oldest voter was in Lowell 95 at 105, and we had 13 centennials who voted in this election. So just as a quick breakdown of our numbers, it was really robust. And one thing we did see is that compared to 2016, the average age of voters dropped from 51 to 49. And so we saw an average age of voters decrease across the county of Missoula. We broke this number out to help give an idea of the percentage of the voters who voted in the overall election. And you can see that through this breakdown, the numbers stay pretty evenly split up until 70 to 79, with the exception of 18 and 19. Then we see a significant drop off in voters of the age 80 and above. But it's not like we can say handedly that the largest majority of voters was in the previous age group. Now, we had a change to our late registration. We had 7 days of late registration compared to 29 days of late registration, which is pretty much our standard area for Montana. This was due to the governor's directive that changed that. And in the 7 days of late registration, we registered 1,171 late registrants. And you can compare that to the 1,930 that were registered in 2016. What we're seeing across the board is that with the deadline of late registration moved back, more voters are receiving regular ballots, and we're still able to serve a considerable number of voters. We had 975 same-day registrants on election day. On election day here at the election center, we had fantastic work in our election center from Jill and from Nathan, who ran that area. We started the day with 12 voting stations, and we knew that the biggest bottleneck would be we had 12 areas to serve voters and 12 voting stations. Throughout the day, they continually took down areas to issue ballots out and added in voting stations because that was the longest area. We did work with voters and offer them the opportunity to vote in their vehicle and drop it off at McCormick Park, but very few voters took that on. At the end of the day, we had 22 voting stations and we had dropped out multiple areas to issue ballots. But what that meant is that our wait times remained the same as we were serving additional voters throughout the day. We had done a lot of outreach before this election to let voters know to be prepared for longer than normal wait times on election day. And we had always stated that the wait times could be up to 4 hours to make sure that voters were prepared for a longer than normal wait. The longest that the wait time got to was just over 2 hours, and it never really increased. As the day went on and we served more voters, the line didn't get longer and the wait time didn't increase as we would normally see, due to the fast thinking of our workers on the ground in the election center. As we broke those out, we see that we had quite a few different late registrants come through of the differing populations. But what we did see is that we didn't get a lot from a very, very far districts. So Evero and Swan being out there. Now, with this being an all-male election, we only had one provisional ballot cast. And this was due to the fact that they had another ballot and we needed to ensure that that one wasn't counted. We were able to resolve that issue for that voter on the same day, ensure that that ballot was counted. But compared to previous elections where we would have over 1,800 provisional ballots on election day, by running a mail ballot election, it significantly dropped the number of provisional ballots. And what that means is that it's quicker for service for voters here on election day, and election results are much more accurate at the close of the election. Instead of having 1,800 ballots to add to the totals on the Monday following, we added in 17. That includes the one provisional UOCAVA voters that had voted and resolved rejected ballots. We did add in extra services. In the primary with COVID-19, we did not do any satellite office events, but we did want to provide these services for the general election. And as you can see, as they got closer to election day, they significantly improved on the services that we were providing. Every single one of these times that we received a ballot or issued a ballot, I think of it as another voter who did not need to queue in line on election day. So these were really, really successful events to be able to ask questions directly to elections, to be able to get a replacement ballot, or to be able to deliver a ballot without having to come all the way into town. At the close of the election, this is something that we've really been trying to cover because it has been a very contentious election, and we've done a lot of work to try and help make sure that we're doing as much education as we can. So after every federal election in Montana, by law, you do a post-election audit. We did this on the 13th of November, and it was a hand count of 3 randomly selected precincts. What we do is we hand count those precincts that are selected by the Secretary of State and confirm that the equipment tallied the votes correctly for voters on election day. Part of our recent records request has been that they had thought that the coding may have changed and votes may have tabulated incorrectly for voters throughout the election. We never changed coding throughout the election. That would not be possible to keep that tabulation continuous from the first ballot through to the other ballots. But also a big area that they didn't know was that after every federal election, you must complete this audit to ensure that your equipment functions correctly. Then after the audit, you'll go to the county canvas. This is where we're going to certify the election results. This is where we make sure that every ballot that was voted had been counted and no ballots were counted more than once or missed. Now, no election is perfect. For this election, we had 0.08% of an error rate. This is almost certainly based off of our accounting on our ballot acceptance to final tabulation. And this is due to the fact that when our machines read, they're only going to report a tally off of page 1, not page 2. But we had inconsistencies in our ability to correctly account for page 1 and page 2 when they had been missorted or a voter had not returned both pages. Now, we're talking about 56 ballots out of 76,000. However, the one area that we were discussing is that in elections, our goal is to make sure that every eligible voter gets to vote, every valid ballot gets counted, and accuracy is absolutely paramount. So if there's one big area that we're working on, it's really going to be how do we lower that number of missorted ballots that aren't accounted for correctly. None of those would have had any impact on any race. If they were all in the exact same race, there wasn't enough to sway any of the results. However, we want to make sure that it's as accurate as possible. Now, after each election, we do a breakdown in our office and we pull in key staff from multiple different areas and talk about things that went well and things that we can improve upon. Some of the big areas that went well were outreach. After this election, we did a lot, or after the primary election, we did a lot of outreach to polling place voters and inactive voters. After the primary election, we had inactivated voters with an undeliverable mail ballot as the law prescribes. But also we reached out to every inactive voter to state you are currently inactive. If you are expecting to receive a ballot, you'll need to fill out this form. And we reached out to polling place voters stating that you're normally a polling place voter. In order to be more successful in this election, please fill out this form. We can update your address. We can get a new signature. The end result of this was that 80% of our active voters now are absentee voters in Missoula County, and that was an increase of over 7%. So that is a fantastic area where that sort of outreach we can do within our office to make it more successful for voters on election day. Another area that they stated that went really well was assisted living facilities. We changed our outreach to assisted living facilities drastically because of COVID-19. In the past, we've worked directly with assisted living facilities and sent out representatives to help register voters. For this, in order to be safer, we provided that contact and liaison between the assisted living facility, the list of registered voters at that address, as well as helped guide them through how to update a voter registration, cancel a voter registration, and update a move from one room to another. What this meant was they were able to actually see where voters were registered, ensure that voters were updated, and able to help update each of the different voters within their house, within their assisted living facility. After the close of registration, we helped work with them on replacement ballot issues, as well as how they could help get a new ballot if they were unable to leave. This worked out really well, and this is something that we're going to continue with the same method moving forward, because we were able to use far less man hours and have a far greater return. The last area would be just media blitz. With the grant that we had received from the Center for Tech and Civic Life, we were able to purchase paid TV ads. We also had multiple interviews, radio, we had Facebook and other increased promotions online, and we did a considerable outreach on different interviews, different number reports, and really just tried to make sure that voters knew how the election was running in Missoula. For those of you who were on the EAC, you'll know that during the primary election, we had an issue with skewed ballots from our printer. And we worked hard to set up a series of quality assurance checks between our printer as well as a tracking and a sign-off. And we were able to resolve all of the printing issues on the ballots and set up a future area, which is more efficient for our printing, helps hold our vendors accountable, and helps ensure that our elections go through smoothly. When we do our preparation for ballot, we number the precincts. So every precinct in Missoula County is named based off of where they vote in the House District. Bonner, 89. They vote at Bonner Elementary School in House District 89. To help ensure that voters received the right ballots and that ballots were sorted correctly throughout this process, we numbered them. 1, Bonner 89. 2, Bonner 92. Those numbers helped our staff sort ballots and prepare ballots better, and helped ensure a more successful election with over 150,000 pages being processed. Drive-through ballot drop-off. We'd slated 3 days for drive-through ballot drop-off. The first day that we were open after ballots had mailed, we set up an ad hoc drive-through ballot drop-off, and that remained open every single day up through the election. This is an example of meeting voters where they're at. We had so many people who wanted to drop off a ballot in person that we had on the fly set up a tent. We moved that tent. We later then got a semi-permanent tent. We've moved it a few times. We worked on traffic issues, but we set up that drive-through drop-off and it received almost half of our ballots through. You'll hear me discuss the pivot in late registration, same-day registration on election day. Being able to turn those areas to issue ballots to voters into voting stations was very, very fantastic. And our COVID protocols. We worked hard to try and keep everybody safe and healthy. I'm very excited to let you all know that we saved every wellness check sheet for 3 weeks past the election, and not once was I contacted by the health department for close contacts from those check-in sheets. We worked hard to help make sure that we did everything we could to keep voters as well as staff safe and healthy throughout this election, and we were able to get 90% ballot return rate and help ensure that the election was not the reason for the spread of COVID-19. Moving in, some areas for improvement. As we had people who were late registering, they will fill out a voter registration card. And then we needed to improve our flow as those voter registration cards left late registration for signature verification over here. We're still working on the best way to improve that, but we definitely flagged that as an area where we either need to scan those into the system as they're being received, or a setup where we can scan them each day to help process those voters' votes. We also need to improve our training. Every time I've looked back through a presentation, we've included improve our training, specifically for parking. In this new location, with this flow, with COVID-19, with all of these areas, we had some overflow outside of our parking areas, and we needed to help keep them out of the streets better. We're going to work closely with the city police to train people, and we've actually received a few areas for training that we can do for anybody who's working in the parking lot. In general, we want to improve our election aid areas, and then we want to improve that write-up of how we will reject ballots to ensure that our accounting goes through correctly. We've got a lot of handouts, but we want to make sure everybody gets trained individually each day to ensure that they're all accounting for them the same, because that'll take that number from 0.08% down to 0.081%. Envelope printing. As I talked about our numbered precincts on our envelopes, there was an error with that numbering system that came through. We were able to resolve it 1/4 of the way into that envelope printing, but it was an area that we flagged for follow-up in the future. And then additional service is needed. You heard me mention that the first day we came back to our office after ballots had been mailed, well, that was the day after Indigenous Peoples Day. And we'll just need to improve how much service we provide. We did put forward a proposal for legislation that would allow an after-hours ballot drop box, but it just felt like there was never a good time to leave. When we leave, we have to treat everybody the same. I can't accept one ballot from one voter because then I have to accept them from everybody, or else I'm not treating all voters equitably. And that can be hard at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. We're here at random times, and with the law written, the only way to provide equal service to voters may have been 24-hour service. In the future, we're going to really want to look to see what do we do, how do we help provide the most service we can, because we want voters to feel confident that their ballot will arrive here, and we want to help provide additional services. There's nothing worse than telling somebody, I'm sorry, you can mail it or you can come back tomorrow. But by law, we can't have an after-hours ballot drop box. We talked a little bit about the flow of our parking lot and the late registration line. A big area for this is going to be working to complete our building and the fact that not all voters will need to come here. Finally, we had an error with all of our express votes that were located outside. When they were outside at a drive-through drop-off location, they wouldn't feed activation cards due to the temperature. We were able to work with the vendor and nail down the reasons why this happened, and it was definitely a temperature issue. But it is a concern as we come into the next legislature, and we're looking at proposed legislation which may require them at all drop locations. This could be prohibitive on having them at a drive-through drop location, because we have been the subject of a lawsuit in the past in Missoula County for not having ADA equipment set up where it was needed. And I'm cautious that we could be putting ourselves in a situation where we can't have ADA equipment at that location and know that it'll function correctly on election day.
Bradley, this is Travis. Just a quick question. Was it too hot or too cold?
Too cold. It was the fact that it was 20 degrees outside on the morning. If they were left in a vehicle and brought inside, they wouldn't work until they'd warmed up inside. And then we had them at Clearwater. We had them at the fairgrounds. We had them outside at those locations, and they wouldn't feed through in the outside locations.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I know, Travis, you've been working hard on that, so I plugged that in specifically to make sure that I didn't miss it during our discussion here. Now with this, how do we fix some of these areas? How do we improve upon this? Well, some of this will be resolved by a vaccine. When we don't have to pull everybody into the same location for an all-mail election. In particular, we can prevent a 2-page ballot by upgrading our equipment software. We're currently on a version called Unity. The new version is called Electionware. If we upgrade, our current precinct level tabulators will not work with the new system. Now, part of that would then lead towards, do we invest in new voting equipment or work at central count? I'm bringing some of these areas up because these are big decisions that the elections office will be looking at over the next couple of years. And I want you guys in right now as part of this discussion. A new parking lot layout and ballot drop-off will help with some of our traffic issues. Another area is we're going to expand our drive-through drop-off locations before Election Day to provide additional areas. And then the last aspect is we didn't have an area to queue voters in. At the fairgrounds, they could all wait in the commercial building and then come for registration. Here we had everybody outside. Well, that actually worked out positive for us with COVID-19. But in the future, we should have a waiting area which could accommodate up to 75 voters. So that way we can have people seated in the heat where we can go through, we can first triage to make sure they need to be at this location, and then we can provide the best service we can. But those will be some improvements that we're looking at. I wanted to start with a little bit of information about this tabulation software and let you guys know a little bit about the pros and the cons that we're looking at. Our current tabulation software is familiar. Nathan and I know how to use it. It works with our precinct level and our high-speed tabulators. It does not allow an express vote activation card to be read by either. So that is a little bit of a negative area for that. I'm still working closely with the state to determine how we work with activation cards if they're readable and they become ballots. I think that we got some great areas that authorize new equipment, and in this next legislature, there's been a big discussion on cleaning up some of those laws. The other con is that there's narrower margins on our current ballot, and that leads us to these two-page ballots. Of all of the aspects, as I reached out to other election administrators, they stated, you got to get to Electionware. You get a 1/4 inch more margin across the whole ballot, and you can fit all of your areas on one ballot. You can go to a longer ballot. You can use express vote activation cards as ballot, and they've got additional write-in and resolution ballot functionalities where it will take an image of the write-in races or any races which have been kicked out for review so that they can be resolved digitally instead of through the teams that we currently have set up. I had a lot of discussion with Ravalli County about the write-in specifically, and this could be a very big plus for us because in Missoula County, we'll have 3 or 4 party ballots regularly, and all of those that don't have a candidate filed need to be recorded. This can help ensure that they're all recorded accurately and much faster than normal. Now, the big con to Electionware is it won't work with our M100, our precinct level tabulator. So we're currently on these M100 precinct level tabulators. With the new activation cards and with the new software, they must be upgraded to a DS200 tabulator. We currently have 92 M100s, 32 are in service. In 2019, Dana had removed many of them from service. They're very consistent in reading ballot markings, and our staff is familiar, but they're aging. The ballot error messages aren't always intuitive, and you can only have 10 precincts per card. So if we ever had a place that had 20 precincts in there, we'd have to have specific M100s for specific ballots. The last area is they run off of a PC MCIA card, and those can be tough to get, and they will not work with the new software. Now, the new ones are much more friendly touchscreen. They use the thumb drives and the same technology as the M100, but they can read different ballot sizes, work with the express vote, and help us with tracking those write-in ballots. Now, they don't have a ballot diverter, but the new software may address that because if we're not separating out all of our write-ins to count directly, we can do it through another area. They will work with the new software. However, there is the look that this may be an opportunity for the county to become a central count county, and there are costs associated with upgrading that equipment. I wanted to put that bug in your ear because this is part of what Denver was discussing earlier, how we want to come up with a big plan and a schedule throughout the whole calendar year and election.
Bradley, I have another question.
Go ahead, Travis.
Sorry. On your previous slide, with the M100s and the DS200, I guess go back another one.
Yeah, one sec. I gotta get out to get back in.
Sorry. Anyways, my question is, so those both are precinct level tabulators, right?
Yes, those are precinct level tabulators.
And so then the third option would be to not have precinct level tabulators and ship all ballots to a central count location that would also be able to count regular ballot style plus express vote style, correct?
Exactly. And there are benefits and drawbacks to that. Forgive me as I'm presenting through Teams and it's jumping back and forth on me. There are benefits and drawbacks to that. I think that this is kind of the discussion that I would love to have the EAC start working on in the next calendar year. What are the specific benefits and drawbacks? What are the positives? What are the negatives? What are the costs? And these are great areas that I can help provide you with all of the data and the information. And we can work back and forth both between areas of specialization that you guys have. I mean, Travis, you've got a fantastic connection through Summit with the ADA community on some of these questions. How would you feel about putting your ballot in a drop box? The other area being, how do rural voters feel? How do some voters feel about the drop box versus the equipment? And where do the costs come into play compared to the benefits to the elections office? Does that make sense?
Bradley, this is Todd, and I have a question. What is a ballot diverter?
Ballot diverter moves our write-in ballots to one side of the bin. And so in our M100s, underneath them, there are two bins, one for write-ins and one for regular ballots that don't have a write-in that needs to be counted. The new one doesn't have that diverter because the software has the ability to review those write-ins specifically. And so it's a little bit of a change to our overall process and setup. But I think that it could be a positive one in the long run because those write-in vote totals aren't added until the Monday following the election. So the specific person of who got the write-in vote isn't added until the Monday following the election, unless it's a race where that may have more specific impact.
I see. And the majority of the ballot diverters are not working on the 32 machines that are currently in service?
Yeah, the ballot diverters stick. And so they've been through service, but they're technically not a part of our maintenance contract, just the tabulator on top. And since they have not been producing M100s, I want to say for 5 years now, we're running out of surplus equipment to buy. Now, when Dana had pulled out almost 60 of them from service, that did free up, and we're using the best of the ballot diverters and ballot bins underneath.
I see. So you own 92 of the machines, but you're only using 32 in a given election.
Yep, and she pulled them out of maintenance because there's a yearly maintenance charge on each of these, and it was a good cost savings to the county, and it didn't have a big impact. I just wanted to be sure to denote that there are many more than the 32 we're currently using.
But you only need to replace 32.
Exactly, and the 200s can hold more ballots in there without the diverter.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. I'm kind of going through things pretty quickly, but I'm trying to be very mindful of time, knowing that I've got a few more slides, and we'd love to hear just a brief overview of some of the survey results from Christina, just a little bit about how, where, and why. And our next big project coming up rapidly this week is candidate filing. Candidate filing for school and special districts begins this Thursday. So online through that link on our website, you can go to missoulavotes.com under information for candidates. You'll find out these filing start dates. I always like to point out special districts, fire districts, sewer districts, irrigation districts, those close over a month before the school filing closes. You'll notice on there that the school filing is considerably longer. Part of this is that with that filing date being so long, we don't know until the end of March which school elections we'll be having, and that really dictates the size of the election this spring. Now, the other question I've been getting is, I've heard that there's somebody running for mayor. I can't find any candidate filing for them. Many people will file with the Commissioner of Political Practices and run an exploratory campaign or something similar. Actual filing period for the municipal elections next fall does not start until the 22nd of April. So if any of you are getting those questions, I wanted to make sure that you knew that as well. I heard that there are all these people who are running for mayor or city council. Well, they may have filed with the Commissioner of Political Practices, but they won't be able to file paperwork with us until April. Jumping in with this, I wanted to let you guys know about a records request that we have received. Representative Sheeta did a large-scale records request as a FOIA and had two specific areas that they were looking at. Altered ballots. We had given guidance to a voter who was unable to come into our office to get a replacement ballot, that they could open the envelope, write a note on there, reseal the envelope, and follow the steps outlined by the Secretary of State to change that vote. There were concerns that there may be thousands of ballots that had been altered similarly, and they'd requested any ballots altered in that capacity. When we have a large-scale records request, we bill for the hours associated with preparing those records. And rather than us going through and looking for ballots altered in that capacity and presenting them to Representative Sheeta, they'd asked to review all of the altered ballots. As a part of that, we need to go through and protect confidential voters' address information. And there are two steps to that. They want to see the affirmation envelope and the ballots. Affirmation envelopes are available, and we can prepare those. The ballots are not available. They must have a court order to open any sealed ballots after an election. The other area of the request was about resolution ballots, any changes from the machine errors and the change to the coding. Well, so they asked for resolution board members and communications, and we were going to provide forward any rosters. We've been able to pull a list of the audit logs from the machines, but we can't provide those ballots or the coding as it's proprietary. But whenever we get a request like this, I always like to look at it as a great educational opportunity to let the person requesting and the public know about all of the steps that we do. A big area of this was just talking about the post-election audit, and that no, the machine coding can't change, and we audit to help ensure that this doesn't happen. We are currently in the process. When we had requested payment, we're just awaiting payment to proceed forward. And so this may or may not proceed depending on if they send payment into our office. The next project that we'll have starting right away is the National Voter Registration Act. This is going to cancel inactive voters, and it's going to inactivate voters who didn't vote in the last federal election. We talked about ballot return rate compared to turnout, and this is how we inactivate voters. And this is why we've seen these changes. One of the big interview questions I got was, is this record-setting turnout? Record-setting turnout was 86%. I want to say it was the Gerald Ford election. But because of this National Voter Registration Act law change, which added these inactive voters, we won't be able to hit those turnout numbers from the 70s. We just have more voters here who are inactive through this process, and they're inactive. They can request a ballot at any time that they're in that status, and they'll remain in that inactive status for 2 federal general elections. So in January, we'll send them a mailing. If that comes back undeliverable and we have no access, no voter initiated activity, we'll send them a second mailing. And then if that one comes back as undeliverable, we'll move them to be inactive. They can always reactivate by sending in a written request or by filling out a voter registration card. In the middle of all of this, we're going to be running the second election is tentative right now on the 23rd of February. We received a resolution to run a Sealy Sewer District election. The ballots will mail on the 3rd, but since sewer district elections are also open to property owners, we're working directly with that board to notify those owners. Whenever we're trying to run an election that's not on a pre-scheduled date, I like to run them concurrently to save on costs and time for our staff. It saves the voters some money, and it also saves us some money coming through. Guys, I just saw in here that I actually have somebody who has their hand raised. Denver, what have I missed on you there?
Not a problem at all. Thanks for taking the question, though. Going back to what you were previously talking about with the National Voter Registration Act, and that culling process that moves voters to inactive status, removes voters that were inactive for the last 2 cycles. What percentage of voters are removed from the active rolls each cycle?
I don't know. I should be able to pull that out of the system here at the beginning of the year. They haven't yet opened that up, and I'm uncomfortable I do all of these out of test.
Sure.
And I honestly don't know. I've done this process only 2 times before, once when I was brand new and once in 2018. Anecdotally, I would say 2,000 to 3,000, but I'll get that exact number for you guys.
That would be super helpful, and I appreciate it. I didn't want to take up any more necessary time, but I feel like that is an important question, and I'd love to see some numbers on it.
Yeah, you bet, because I can easily pull the number that we're moving to canceled and the number that we reach out to, because that number drops significantly with 2 mailings. The number that we reach out to that never get back in touch with us goes from, we'll say, 7,000 down to 5,000 that we move to that inactive status.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet. My last area that I've got for you guys is a little bit about some of the work that I have been doing very specifically this spring. The Secretary of State's office is proceeding forward with their voter database. I say improvement, it is a switch. It is a new database for the entire state. Through my work in 2019, I have been the product owner by proxy for the state of Montana. So I've been very involved with this process of setting up user stories, making sure that we have all the information in, and also testing the database to make sure it works correctly. They're looking at a rollout in September. You'll notice I put this as tentative. That would be the ideal time for us, and Missoula would be one of the pilot counties for our municipal primary election. If we had one, we would run the election out of both databases to confirm that it was functioning correctly on both of them. Statewide, the entire state would run for the general elections in November on the new database. And this is a vast improvement from the current database we have. I believe it was started in 2005, and it was pulled over from a previous state's database and has had constant improvements to it. This new database has a lot of opportunities and availabilities. Easier to utilize, it is more secure, it is online based for counties, and it has a lot of fantastic tools. The voter portal, My Voter Page, could be used for every election. We can add in additional information for voters. There are fantastic tools like online voter registration and other areas that are built into the database that, if the state moves towards that in the future, can be implemented. The last area is I have been asked to serve as the district committee chairperson, and that means I am also on the legislative committee. So I found this out last week. I've been getting quite a few different emails, and I'll be reviewing a lot of the bills and providing feedback and comments. In general, my rule is that I don't like to testify at the legislature unless I've been asked by the committee to do so. This will likely be a lot of online testimonials and that sort of aspect. I'm not certain how the legislature will break out. I like to follow, but in general, sometimes there can be areas where Missoula County supporting something can make it harder to get passed than if it's supported by a different county and a different legislature outside of Missoula. Now, that being said, I will have access to a lot of election information and I'll be able to help forward that over and say, these are the bills that the association is tracking. If you guys are interested, you can be knowledgeable. We can let you know how you can reply specifically if there's something that you're personally interested in. And we can let you know a little bit as we go through this legislative cycle, what areas we're watching, which bills are gaining traction, and our thoughts and feelings on them. So that is a ton of information. My apologies, guys. Feel free to shoot me any questions. I did email this to everybody, so you can have a copy of this and you can be available to review this at any time. But being mindful of the amount of time we have left in this meeting, I did want to say if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me now. But I wanted to give some time to Christina to talk a little bit about the survey and just some rough overview before we go more detail in January. I even made a slide. Questions?
Well, I've got one question on the new software, if you don't mind, Todd, here. Is that primarily a front end, or is it going to require exporting all the data out of the current data engine into a new one? So that is a full database transcription. What do they call it? Data conversion. Now, I did not participate on the data conversion team, which has been active throughout the last year. I stated that I cannot participate in BPro for 2020 cycle. So they are working on pulling everything over, and it will be a full new database, not just a new access user interface, but new database, new setup. It does come and it combines portions of the Washington database as well as the Arizona state database. I know for Christina, she's done some work with our friends over in Maricopa, and they actually use portions of this database. It is a pretty robust database. We're not the first people on it, but it will be a full transition. So it's a big undertaking for this year. Yeah, Washington had some issues, particularly in King County when they switched over to it, I recall. Yep. And with this, we're using portions of that. And a lot of this is in data conversion and testing. Now, data conversion's gone through. We haven't yet started testing. We've cleared all of our testing environments, but we haven't yet really gone into saying, this is our final area of the database. Is it working correctly? Thank you. Yeah. Other questions?
Bradley, similar question about the database. You characterized it as a change or a switch, but not necessarily an improvement. And then you talked about some ways that there's added functionality with the new database and could do a lot more. But it sounds like in the beginning you were saying that there may be some trade-offs. Can you kind of clarify that a little bit for us?
Yeah, and actually I have it listed as database improvements on my slide. I handedly think it's a fantastic overall improvement. On our side, accessing and utilizing the database, it is not intuitive. Denver, you've served as an election aide. You know about entering the data in. Susan, you have also done very similar work. The front end aspect as an end user is fantastic. There is always a learning curve. So when I talk about trade-offs, it's really in that training. And we will be training 56 counties to use this database in the same way. And that, if there is one big trade-off, it is that everybody's familiar with the current database. It is very wonky, as you can attest to, Susan can attest to, but people are familiar with it. And anytime that we do a big change like this, it's going to be questions and, well, here I have this button. How do I do the same thing in the new database? I wholeheartedly feel the interface, the security improvements, and the functionality are all big improvements. If there's a concern, it's training. It's continuity amongst 56 election administrators, and it's a smooth rollout with good testing. I feel really fortunate because as the product owner, it won't go forward until it's been signed off by myself. But with that in mind, there's a lot of work to do between now and the potential November rollout.
Got it. Thank you for elaborating on that.
You bet.
Hey, Bradley, this is Christina. I've got one question for you about the database, just because you'd mentioned it's pulling pieces from the Arizona system. And I don't know if it's the Arizona, the 14 counties, or if it's Maricopa as its own standalone. But I'm curious, one of the problems that Arizona was having was non-traditional addresses, particularly for people in tribal communities. I don't know if that's because of geocoding. I don't know if that's a continuing problem. I'm just thinking about serving constituents and ensuring folks have access to the vote. Can you give me a sort of status on what that looks like for Montana?
You bet. So it's the 14 counties. Maricopa actually uses their own database and uploads all their information into here. It's really, really fun. The database is very similar. Some of the big aspects, the underlying areas, yes, this whole database is geocoded. We actually have a geocode team with members representing Glacier and Rosebud and another county, Dulce, but specific reservation counties because there is a huge geocoding issue. The state is working with those counties to add a geocoding tag to every single address and location. They did do a big improvement to add a non-standard address. It's still a little clunky. We have a lot of non-standard addresses in Missoula County due to construction, and we're always working on this. But in Missoula, what we're going to find is we have a fantastic mapping department, our GIS department, and they'll be able to upload and make database changes on the fly. In my very first election here as the election administrator, we issued out ballots which had the wrong areas in them because of a database error with the address library. Those are prevented, prohibited, and eliminated through the new setup. So there's a lot of big pluses on that. But yeah, there is an issue with reservation areas that aren't geocoded right, and the state has been working since 2019. I'm sorry, since 2019 on getting those all updated with the State Library Association, State Mapping Department, and a team of people who are working on those geocoded locations.
Thanks, Brad.
You bet. I love having you on here because great area to bring up. And in an area of Missoula County, we do have a few areas on the reservation that may have geocoding location issues from the Confederated Tribes just south of Evero, north of Evero. Other questions, guys?
I would just say, Bradley, I think you did a great job providing an overview of the election. I appreciate the numbers that you provided. For committee members, if there is specific information that you would like to see or numbers that you would like to review from the election, I would suggest either mentioning those in the kind of closing committee member comments today, or sending them to Bradley so that he has some direction about what kind of additional information we would like to see from this election.
Great call, Denver. Also, one last thing, I'll just plug it up here for a second. I emailed it to everybody. I have one more handout that I just realized I didn't go over. So in here, you're going to see just a quick update of our numbers. Forgive me, I'm pulling it up for you guys right now. I always hate sharing with you guys on the line with me right now. There we go. This is a breakdown. I tried to give a little bit of a number breakdown, and it's a little bit tight to see, but I tried to break down youngest, oldest, average age, ballot return rate, and turnout numbers by precinct and rural, city, suburban, just to try and help give a little bit more robust numbers. I know that for many of you on this committee, for myself, I love this sort of numbers. And so this is just a little bit extra. Please shoot in the chat, shoot in the comments, and I can pull together a lot of data for you guys.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Bradley. Really appreciate you putting so much time and energy into helping us understand what went well in the election. So thank you again.
Yeah, and I think if there was one big takeaway, it takes a team. By golly, everybody from volunteers, locations, election advisory committee members. Travis put together a sip and puff instructions for the new ADA equipment, outreach from all of you, multiple county departments. We had a very successful election because the whole community pulled together. Okay, that being said, what did the voters think about it, Christina?
Well, Brad, can I share my slides here?
I think I can get you set up to do that.
Let's see. Here we go. Maybe? Can you see that? Can somebody give me a verbal if you can see these?
I cannot see anything so far.
Not yet.
Okay.
So do you? Oh, there we go.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So I was just asked by Bradley and Nathan to give a quick overview. I haven't had time with the team to crunch all of our numbers yet, but as you know, we had a poll out in the field between November 9th and 20th, which consisted of both a telephone survey and an online panel. I can go into the details of why that is, but I want to be mindful of time, so I'm just going to cruise through these. In that time, we collected 698 total responses to our survey. And for those of you that have been around for some time, you might be familiar with the work that we did back in 2016 with Rebecca Connors. This builds on that sort of initial work, as well as some statewide work we did around elections in 2017, and then, of course, the work that we do at the Big Sky poll. So I let the folks know, Bradley and Nathan know, that since we haven't had time to crunch all the numbers yet, I just share with you sort of who we heard from and a couple of top highlights. So gender dynamics of our respondents, we had more women than men participate, which is not unexpected. Census estimates for Missoula, right, is 50% female, but we've known since 1964 women have outnumbered men as participants in elections. And since 1980, every presidential election has had a proportional number of women participate in the election at a higher rate than men. Pew Research found last year that there's about a 3.4% gender gap between men and women in turnout in the 2018 election, which is essentially what we're reflecting in demographics. Age, we see here broken down. Brett, I'm excited to take a look at this compared to the numbers that you just provided on your slideshow. We had slightly fewer voters in the 18 to 26 demographic and slightly more voters age 67 and above than we did in 2017. Interestingly, Montana, as you may know, is on the leading edge of the silver tsunami, and those over age 65 are projected to make up almost 24% of our state's population in 2040. So we're reflecting that in this breakdown as well. Not unexpectedly, our respondents are more highly educated than Americans in general and Monitanans at large. We had 54% holding a bachelor's degree or higher. Again, substantial voter behavior research shows us that voter turnout increases in tandem with educational attainments. And then we asked household income as a question. We see 33% were below $37,001, while 36% earned more than $57,000. This is total household income in 2019. And just as a point of comparison, the U.S. Census estimates Missoula's median income between 2014 and 2018 was $51,000. Party politics. So as you all know, we don't identify by party on our voter registration, aren't required to here in Montana, but we see that we had 39% of our respondents identifying as Democrats, with 28 as independents and 20 as Republicans. So this is a little bit of a shift from the 2017 numbers, where 42% indicated that they were Democratic Party identifying, and 25% identified as Republicans and 21% as independents. Coming from Arizona, which is where I spent some time previous to now, we see Montana trending consistently with the nation that independents are a growing share of the political landscape. So great, demographics are fine and everything, but what's really the meat of this? I just wanted to pull out a few highlights that I thought were worth sharing with this group. We asked about confidence on a number of variables, one of them being, I'm confident that Missoula County is free of voter fraud. And I think that this really speaks to the great work that this team has done, particularly as Bradley was highlighting, the communication with the public, right? So 47% strongly agree and 42% agree. Really, we see this as a high reflection of confidence from the public in Missoula County's election administration. Then we also asked satisfaction on a number of different elements of the electoral process, things like voter registration, change of address, that kind of thing. And we asked about the level of satisfaction with the communication received from Missoula County about voting and deadlines. And again, we see very high levels of satisfaction, right? 66% are very satisfied and 28% are somewhat satisfied. Only 5% reported on the negative, right? Somewhat satisfied, unsatisfied, and very unsatisfied. So again, really something, a feather in the cap of Missoula County here in the elections group on the work that has been done. And then I just wanted to end with a final word from voters. Compared to 2018, the November election, was your experience better, worse, or about the same? And here, only 8% of respondents indicated that their experience was worse than it was in 2018. So with everything going on, COVID, changing of our deadlines, and all of these pieces, I think this really indicates how well Missoula County has performed in the election in 2020. So with that, I will stop my share. I know it's not a ton of juicy detail there, but our data just did come back and we're working on finalizing, cleaning, and providing an update, I believe, at the next meeting.
Yeah, that's perfect. Christina, your screen froze. Would it be okay for me to email those slides to everybody too?
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Bad internet.
No, I'm jealous. So I'll share those out directly here. I'll be working on that email, but I loved it as I was hunting and found the ones that you just shared with me. I think there's some great numbers in there. And when I look at that 8% feel like it was worse, I have the most negative view of our service that we're providing because I like to talk personally to everybody who has a bad experience. And with that in mind, I get a little jaded on how we're doing. And that makes us feel so good because there were some new hurdles that were out of our control for voters. And I didn't know where that number might come in. I think that almost double the people feeling service is better this year than previous makes me feel very good.
Yeah, and just having spent some time putting those slides together and looking at preliminary data, I think just a general perspective of mine is that everybody should feel really positive. The feedback that we see, and we'll go more into detail with this next time, is generally really positive. And there's great juicy information. I know at the last meeting there was a question about how voters receive information, and so we've got some good information there to share when we get back together.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Nathan, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for Christina on that, better or worse. Was that a closed-ended question, or do you have more information to follow on that when you present the entire survey?
It was a closed-ended question. So first we asked if people voted in Missoula County in 2018 in the November general election. And if they said yes, they were asked, compared to that election this year, was it better, worse, about the same, or not applicable?
Sure. Thank you.
Great. Well, I think I'm trying to pull up our agenda here, but I think we're kind of done with my overview, with Christina's overview. And of course, I have to click my link again. I'm like, Denver and I are having issues with clicking these links here. But in general, I mean, trying to get a good area, trying to get some information out from us as to where we're looking at for next year. And Denver and I were talking a little before this meeting. We've got a lot of follow-up that we may do offline to help make sure everybody's really prepared for January. Yeah, we didn't have old business, new business. I think, Denver, I think you're good to take it away at comments. I'll step on your toes if you let me. I'm sorry.
Always. So first of all, just want to say, at the risk of feeling redundant, Missoula County did a fantastic job. We've got some really hardworking, dedicated people who do a ton of work behind the scenes to make everything function. And the EAC is a part of that and can be a greater part of that. I think that the work that we're doing in this moment right now in time, where there is so much skepticism and criticism of elections, is so incredibly important. And I am just really excited about the work that we get to do over the next year. And with that said, I just, again, want to encourage folks, if they have specific information, either about the election report or about the community survey, the poll that we did, please send those questions, those prompts to Bradley, so that we can be prepared to have a robust and complete conversation and make sure that people are able to ask questions and get good, solid answers. So with that, I'll close, and I guess we could probably go to Travis or Bradley. Do you want to kind of go through the roll for member comments?
I have none at this time, Mr. Rose.
I'll come off of mute. There we go. To bear with me on not going specifically through roll, does anybody have specific comments?
I have a comment, Bradley. This is Todd, and I just want to corroborate Denver's and Josh's comments about what a wonderfully smooth process it was in spite of all the hurdles. So you and your staff, Nathan, and the rest of them are really deserve some kudos.
Thank you. I mean, lots of hard work, great team.
I do have a question too. I was speaking with Bobby outside the night of the election, and she indicated she's no longer going to be doing the secretarial duties for the EAC. That then must tie in with your comments earlier. Are we going to have one of the members take that duty on?
We're going to bring that up as a possibility for the next meeting. Nathan and I have it pretty well. And with the meetings being recorded, with the exception of the roll call that I missed from recording this meeting, it's really easy to keep the minutes. So it might be a great opportunity to provide some additional responsibilities, some additional areas, but it wouldn't necessarily be absolute. Nathan's been doing a great job of trying to help keep me organized, keep everyone organized.
Yeah, well, it was seamless. That's it. Thanks.
So this is Susan. Are there any within the EAC? Are there any categories or topical areas that have been identified as areas for members to, like, subcommittees kind of thing?
Yeah, Susan, thank you for the question. In the past, the EAC has kind of functioned in kind of an ad hoc fashion. We really haven't had kind of standing committees that meet regularly and give report outs. That doesn't mean that that's how we necessarily have to or should operate in the future. And I personally like the idea of creating some structure and having people take on some declared areas of interest and learn more about how each kind of aspect of the elections office functions. So I think that's an open question and something that we should explore as a committee about whether or not that's the right way to go. Personally, I see a lot of advantages of doing so.
Yeah, one thing that I observed in working the election is the need for more public education on who we are, what we do, you know, feedback, comments from the public that would be constructive and could be implemented. But it seems like there's a lot of misconception about how the election operates.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, and certainly an area that we can improve. Are there any other comments from committee members?
Hey, this is Mike Hopkins. I just throw in a last minute one. And I meant to say this at the beginning of the call, but I was still technically on another line and both were talking at the same time, so brain frazzled a little bit. But not at the risk of building up too much of a ego or embarrassing our elections office with everybody else already giving kudos. I would just say once again that you guys really knocked it out of the park this year. I get to talk to a pretty decent number of election officials throughout the state, and just about everywhere we were dealing with a whole lot of stuff that we don't usually have to deal with. And Missoula really outperformed a lot of the rest of the state. And so you got a lot of stuff to be proud of there in that office. And I know I've said this to Brad like 20 times at this point, but kudos to everybody there. Really did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
This is Shibu. At the risk of adding another word to the chorus, I also want to echo Mike's praise. And I actually just anecdotally went through the election center as a voter because I accidentally spoiled my ballot and had to fix that and get a new one. And it was really seamless. It felt very safe in terms of COVID, and it was really quick. So as an undercover EAC member going through the system, it was really cool to see it at work. And yeah, a job really well done.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. You know, lots of effort, lots of work, great team. And, you know, all of those together gets us to where we are. And now we got a new bar to clear. So 2022, just going to have to clear this bar now. I like that.
Love it. All right. Well, if there are no other comments from committee members, just going back to our agenda. Last thing we have is to establish the next meeting date. I think we've already got that on the calendar as January 8th. Is that correct, Bradley?
I think it's the 13th. Let me just double check really quick here.
Thank you.
But I believe it's the 13th. And one of the things I was going to say is we'll do some prep work. You'll see emails from Denver and I beforehand. I think it's worth it for us to just up it to a 2-hour meeting at that point in time to help make sure that we are covering a lot of areas, because we'll have a lot of discussions about new members. Christina's got a presentation, and I think that we're working towards a good area to have a great calendar, a great setup for a really great 2021. And I've got it on the 12th.
12th.
Yep. And I'll see if I can get it extended from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock instead of 3 to 4:30.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. This is Susan.
So moved by Susan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Todd. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed, please say nay. You guys have it. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Stay safe and have a happy holidays.
January 12th, correct?
January 12th, 3 p.m.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.